Curious, authoritative. Popular myth tells us the Trojan War began with a golden apple and ended with a wooden horse. But the historical timeline established by ancient sources starts decades earlier, over a broken construction contract. King Laomedon wanted to build the greatest city on earth. Lacking the manpower for such an ambitious project, he hired two disguised gods, Poseidon and Apollo, to construct walls so strong no army could ever breach them. The gods labored for a full year, weaving their divine magic into the very stone. But when the walls were finished, Laomedon refused to pay them for their work. The retaliation was swift. The gods cursed the city, and the hero Heracles soon arrived to exploit the single section of the wall built by mortal hands. Heracles sacked Troy, slaughtered the king, and left a traumatized young prince named Priam on the throne. Priam inherited the finest fortifications in the ancient world, but the royal bloodline was already rotted by the gods. The walls stood firm, even as the dynasty inside them began its long, slow collapse. The warning signs appeared before the next generation was even born. King Priam's wife, Hecuba, woke screaming from a prophetic dream where she gave birth to a flaming torch that burned Troy to ash. Terrified by the seer's interpretation, the royal family attempted to avert fate. They ordered their newborn son, Paris, to be abandoned on a freezing mountain. Instead, a shepherd took pity on the boy and raised him in secret. Decades later, the gods used this forgotten prince to enact their long-awaited revenge. They forced Paris to judge a divine beauty contest, and the goddess Aphrodite secured his vote by awarding him Helen, the queen of Sparta. Paris kidnapping Helen was not an isolated incident. The gods had perfectly engineered the diplomatic crisis needed to detonate a powder keg they had been filling for 30 years. Stealing a single queen usually sparks a localized border skirmish, yet the abduction of Helen triggered a massive intercontinental conflict. The mechanism that caused this escalation was the Oath of Tyndareus. Years earlier, the clever king Odysseus devised a diplomatic treaty requiring every Greek ruler to swear to defend Helen's eventual marriage with their own lives. When Helen was taken, King Agamemnon of Mycenae recognized the opportunity. He invoked the oath, calling in the debts of all those Greek kings to amass an armada of 1,000 ships. Agamemnon commanded the wealthiest, most heavily fortified kingdom in the Greek world. By weaponizing his vast economic resources and military might, he turned a rescue mission into an empire-building conquest. The Oath of Tyndareus operated as a geopolitical trap. Because of a single broken law of hospitality, the entire known world was legally forced into a brutal, inescapable meat grinder on the beaches of Troy. The invasion force hit the shores, but the divine engineering of Troy's walls held perfectly. Neither side could gain an inch, locking two massive armies into a gruesome 10-year stalemate. The Greek war machine slowly collapsed. Their supply lines starved, the god Apollo decimated their ranks with plagues, and their greatest warrior, Achilles, withdrew his troops entirely over a petty dispute with Agamemnon. Order broke down completely when the gods abandoned their neutrality. Breaking Zeus's direct embargo, immortals descended onto the battlefield to physically clash with each other and slaughter mortals in the dirt. Facing total defeat, Odysseus realized that brute force would never breach walls built by Poseidon. The Greeks had to bypass the stone entirely using psychological warfare. The Greeks constructed a massive wooden horse and abandoned their camps. By presenting the structure as a weaponized religious idol, they exploited Trojan piety, tricking their enemies into dragging the traps straight through their own impenetrable gates. As Greek soldiers poured from the horse and slaughtered the city from the inside, Laomedon's ancient curse was finally fulfilled. The divine walls stood firm, but the actions of the royal bloodline brought Troy to ashes. Winning the war was only half the tragedy. During the sack of Troy, Greek soldiers committed horrific atrocities and defiled sacred temples, instantly turning their own patron gods against them. Odysseus survived the brutal siege, only to make a fatal error on his voyage back. He boasted of his cleverness after blinding the Cyclops, directly insulting the creature's father, Poseidon. The divine sanction was absolute. The sea god weaponized the ocean itself, twisting currents and conjuring storms to ensure Odysseus could never navigate home. For 10 years, the crew was subjected to a gauntlet of cannibalistic giants, deadly hostile witches, and a literal descent into the dark underworld. One by one, every single man under Odysseus's command was wiped out. The Greeks had sailed to Troy in pursuit of immortal glory. They paid for that ambition with an agonizing, solitary fight for survival across hostile waters. 20 years later, Odysseus finally washed up on the shores of Ithaca. With his palace infested by over 100 violent usurpers, the king was forced to enter his home disguised in the filthy rags of a beggar. Guided by the wisdom of the goddess Athena, he cornered his enemies in the Great Hall. He violently reclaimed his throne, ending a 50-year cycle of bloodshed. Homer's narrative links these decades of slaughter through a direct chain of cause and effect. Every tragedy in the Iliad and the Odyssey traces back to a single choice, a single broken oath, or a moment of unchecked pride. From King Laomedon's unpaid debts to Agamemnon's greed, every action demands a brutal reaction. In war, there are no easy victories. Even the winners must survive the agonizing journey home.